I work the night shift in a fire watch tower that sits like a nailhead on the spine of a low Oregon ridge. On clear days, you can see the timber tapering away into blue, 1,000 miles of trees pretending to be the same tree. At night, that same distance compresses into black glass, and the only world is whatever my cameras can pull out of it. My room is metal and humming. 5 monitors on a steel desk, a hard-wired radio, a landline that clicks before it rings, and a coffee maker that tastes like the inside of an old thermos. The heater grumbles when the wind leans at the tower. There's a cot under the far window that I don't use much. If I sleep, I miss things. The software flags movement, heat signatures, and color shifts that look like smoke. I verify, log, call it in. That's the rhythm. If I do it right, people don't notice me at all because nothing burns down. The first night the lights showed up was late August. The air cut to tinder and the horizon a lid on a pot. It was 1:53 a.m. Sector C pinged for anomalous light motion. I've seen that tag 100 times. Headlights on county roads, hunters with high lumens, campers ignoring bands. I zoomed the camera and found 3 pale beads deep in the forest where there were no roads. They were faint and steady, moving as if strung on a wire, curving around a snag, down behind a low ridge and up again, a loop. I watched them cross at the same point twice and pause them against a dead tree that looked like a raised finger. It wasn't the brightness that bothered me. It was the smoothness, not bobbing like flashlights, not sweeping like headlights, gliding like habit. At 3:11 a.m., they blinked out simultaneously, not a fade, a cut. I logged the time, the coordinates, and called Malone, the duty ranger. He's one of those big-shouldered men the job carves down to essentials. You can tell he used to run saw by how he stands, weight on the inside edges of his feet, ready to step to either side of a problem. Sector C lights, I said. At this hour, he said. I heard the stiffness in the way he sat up in bed. Kids, too deep, I said. No road comes close. He grunted like he didn't want to lend the night his attention. I'll come up tomorrow. He came with a thermos that dented when he set it down. We didn't talk much. At 1:53, the software pinged like it had been waiting. 3 beads, same line, same pause by the snag. Malone leaned over my shoulder until his breath fogged the glass. That's a crew walk, he said. What? You move like that when you're cutting line in the dark. Your body remembers the step. One hand's on a Pulaski, the other's on a drip torch or beater. You pace. You wait for the man ahead. You tie in. You keep moving. There's no crew out there, I said. Not tonight. He didn't look away from the screen. Maybe another one. At 3:11, they shut off again, obedient to their own schedule. Malone didn't say anything on his way down the stairs. I heard the tower door slam and the wind take the sound away. In the morning, he called to say the sheriff had hiked in at first light and found old dozer line, a scorched stump, and a boot heel that had sat so long moss was trying to claim it. No fresh prints, no fire, just the shape of where one had been. The third night the lights were back, same time, same loop. The third bead lagged at the snag again, exactly 8 seconds by my count, before hurrying to catch the other 2. That was when I went into archives. The tower has a cabinet that sticks and smells like old school books if you work the drawer loose. Incident maps, typed reports, Polaroids with dates written in pencil. In one folder from 1997, lightning had started 5 fires at once. Sector C was one of them. A night crew cut line and held it. The report credited them with saving a whole flank. One name had a line through it. 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗬𝗢, last seen Aero 210, presumed lost in a slopover. His helmet was found 5 days later near a snag. The body never turned up. When the lights paused at that snag, I couldn't pretend it was nothing. I called Malone and read the name anyway. He was quiet long enough that the line clicked like it was thinking. He lagged, he said. Chuck always lagged. Bad ankle from wrestling in high school. Wouldn't admit it. We told him to pace himself. He acted like pacing was an insult. You knew him. He ran with us that season. I heard the careful way he put the next sentence down. He was 27. You think all men that age are indestructible until the woods remind you what's true. After that, the tower didn't feel like a workplace. It felt like a seat in a theater where a play repeats for an audience of one. The lights came at 1:53 and looped and cut at 3:11. When they were in a TT there, I saw the after image of them in my apartment, 3 pale ovals on the inside of my eyelids. I had to be washing dishes and realize I was counting to 8 while I waited for the sink to drain. I didn't tell anyone else. If you say something out loud, it asks to be believed or not, and I didn't want to owe the lights proof. I wanted to watch them without explaining them to any person. The forest felt like a mouth, waiting to see if I'd finish a sentence it started. On the 5th night, I pulled up a map of the old line and laid tracing paper over it. I sketched the path the beads followed on my monitor. When I overlaid it, the loop matched the crew S assignment from the old plan. Cut from the creek to the ridge, tie in at the snag, continue to the old dozer berm. The 8-second pause, the hesitation, sat right on the tie-in. On the report, someone had circled it in pencil hard enough to leave an indentation that shows through 3 pages. I brought the map to Malone. He spread it on the desk and pressed his fingers against the paper like he was testing the thickness. He didn't look at me when he said, "If we finished this now, would it change anything?" "How would we finish something that already happened?" I asked. "Same way you fix a fence you forgot to tie off last fall," he said. "You go back with new wire. You close what you left open." "It's ridiculous. Most fixes are," he said, "until they aren't." We broke policy and went out that night with the hand tools in the bed of his truck. We parked as far as the service road led us and hiked in by headlamp. The forest at night is not the same place as the forest by day. By day, the trees shoulder one another aside and make bright aisles. At night, the air is closer and the ground talks. Small sounds amplified by your skull. We found the old line by feel. The way compacted soil makes a different sound under boot than leaf litter. We stopped at the snag. Up close, it looked like a man frozen mid-speech. Jar scar on the windward side grown smooth over time. Malone rested his palm on it, like a post he'd leaned on all his life. "What time?" he said. 1:42, I said, checking my watch. They start at 1:53. "We've got a few minutes to remember how to be young," he said. We exposed mineral soil with spades, cold pale earth like the inside of a bone. We worked where the tie-in should have been until the line looked plain and disciplined, a crescent of protection between what could burn and what we wanted to keep. There was nothing to tie it to except the idea of the other line. It felt like making a gesture in a conversation that had gone quiet. At 1:53, the air took on that hush that tells you something has started without you. We turned off our lamps. The ground around us cooled and then warmed, the way night can breathe even when wind is low. I didn't see bodies. I felt timing. The brush to our left bent a little as if shoulders passed. A smell rose like struck matches, 3 pale glows, too soft for flames, too steady for flashlights, drifted along the parallel line, and they neared the tie-in. The third lagged, faithful to its loop. I counted to 8, and when I reached 8, Malone said softly, "Now," and stepped through our fresh bare crescent, one boot after the other, as if he were walking a bridge he trusted. For a second, the air pressed down hard against my ears. Something like a weight moved across my shoulders without touching me. The third glow brightened like it had drawn breath. Then all 3 moved on and were gone into the dark that still had shape because we made a shape for it. At 3:11, nothing cut. There was no drama. The forest simply decided not to show us that part of itself anymore. We stood in the tie-in with our hands on our knees and panted like boys who run at recess. Malone wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "We should have done that then," he said. "We didn't know. We never do. We didn't tell anyone." We drove back in a silence that wasn't empty. The next night, the software didn't ping for lights. I watched Sector C anyway, uncomfortable in the absence. At 2:17, a single pixel brightened for a fraction too small to log. If you hadn't been looking, you wouldn't have known. The map of the forest on my monitor looked like it always had. But in my body, a count completed, 8 beats landing where they should, and some part of me that had been leaned forward let go of the rail. For 3 nights there were no loops. The 4th, at 1:53, they came back as if we'd imagined our fix. 3 beads, same path. The 3rd lagged. I felt something like humiliation, and then anger, hot and stupid. I talked to the screen. "What do you want me to do?" I said. We closed it. The 3rd bead paused, and I knew I was reading meaning where there was none. But I couldn't stop. I pulled up the old plan again and stared at the margin where someone had written a note in pencil. I had to angle the paper under the desk lamp to see it. The pressure of the pencil showed more than the graphite. "Tie in. Check radio logs. 2:17. I don't know. Do you know why I hadn't turned to the radio logs right away? The tower had a binder full of printed call transcripts. I flipped through to the week of that fire. There was a gap between 2:05 and 2:30, labeled with a yellow sticky note, static. Below it, on a sheet skewed in the copier, a half-caught transmission. "Lost visual on chase. Thinks he's in the black. Hold you on the die until..." The next line was a timestamp, so 2:17. Under that, someone had typed in later, "No further voice contact." The note was initialed M. The pen strokes were the way Malone makes them when he's trying to be neat. I found him on the ground next day, checking a culvert the last rain had bullied. I handed him the copy. He read it and kept his face empty the way you do when your body wants to make an old expression. "But you won. T let it." "I've listened to those logs," he said. "That gap is a hole I fell into every time I tried to cross it." "Why did the lights come back?" I said. "We finished it." He shrugged with one shoulder. "Maybe finishing the line wasn't the only thing we left undone." "What else is there?" "Talking," he said. "We never called him off because we thought he'd come out. We acted like we'd hear him any second. Then dawn came and we were already packing the world into explanations. I didn't like where that was going, because it meant imagining a conversation with no other voice on the line. I didn't like admitting that a forest could keep a sentence waiting for an answer and choose a person to give it one. That night I took the spare portable radio, put fresh batteries in, and went to the tower roof. The wind leaned on me and the tower leaned back. I clipped the mic to my collar and set the frequency to the old channel. The digital display looked ridiculous, with its bright numbers trying to speak to a past that had never seen them. At 2:16, I keyed the mic and froze. The air felt too thick. The ridge lights from the nearest town winked the way they do when your eyes water. At 2:17, I said, 𝗥𝗘𝗖𝗢𝗥𝗘𝗦 secure. Repeat, tie-in secure. Hold and return. We have you. It felt stupid. If anyone heard it, they'd think I was drunk on an old story. The radio hissed in a soft, even way. The hiss continued. When I let go of the mic, it cut to silence so clean, it made my skin jump. Then a click. One of those small sounds electronics make when they remember what they are. A man's voice came through, stretched thin by time. Copy. The hiss ate the rest. Then, lost sight. Coming along. Then, see the snag. Hold. And then another voice I knew. Malone's younger, pressed through cheap capacitors. We've got you. You're in the black. Walk to my voice. I didn't hear my own voice on that recording because I knew it wasn't a recording. It was a shape finding the place I left for it. I didn't tell myself any stories about it because the one I was inside was enough. The lights didn't show that night. They didn't show the next either. On the third night, a storm rolled through and the tower creaked until the bolts talked back. When the wind died, the forest made the quiet it makes when the worst thing didn't happen. I slept on the cot and dreamed of walking through somebody else's house in the dark, hands out, trying not to hit my shin on furniture that had moved. The week after, a high school intern came to shadow day shift for a civics project. She wore a sweatshirt with a cartoon bear and asked if forests remember. It was the kind of question you smile at when you are 23 and trying not to scare a kid. I said that people remember directly, and forests remember indirectly. Scarred bark, stunted regrowth, soil that doesn't spring the same after heat. She wrote that down and nodded as if the phrasing made it true. I didn't hear the lights again until the first cold night of September. 1:53, Sector C pinged. 3 beads, a loop. I watched them not with dread, but with the wary respect you offer an animal that has been taught once and might forget. The third lagged at the snag. I didn't count to 8. I let the count count me. The beads went on and then did something they hadn't done before. They crossed past the old dozer berm and faded not with a cut, but with a thin, dimming drift, like breath on glass. I called Malone without taking my eyes off the screen. They changed. How? They went home without the show. He took a long time to answer. Good. 2 days later, I found a small sliver of reflective tape on the floor under the desk, near the kick plate. It must have been stuck to the cuff of my pants or the sole of my boot. It was the size of a fingernail, adhesive gone. The surface dulled until you moved it, and it found the light again. I held it in my palm and understood the smallness of the things that outlast us. There was one more night I should tell you about because it belongs to the story, the way a last breath belongs to a life. It was mid-September, the air sharp, the tower's heater banging in the wall like a fist in a neighbor's apartment. Sector B had been flagging fog all night. Sector C was quiet. At 2:12, the radio, the tower one, not my pocket set, made that soft click it makes before somebody decides to speak. I didn't reach for it in time. I sat and watched the light on its face glow like a coal. At 2:17, a voice I didn't recognize said, "Gate, house, wind south-southwest, fire watch maintained." The last time I heard those words, they were in the mouth of a different forest, in a different country, many years and miles from here. But the way men say the same phrases when they want to keep the world still. crosses borders. I answered without pushing transmit, which is to say I didn't answer at all. I don't know what I would have said, maybe the truth, which was that some of us don't leave until someone tells us we can, and sometimes the someone is a stranger who happens to be there when a loop gives up on itself. I haven't seen the beads in months. That doesn't mean they're gone. It means the forest has moved the show to a different hour or a different audience. I still work the tower. I still log fog and call in columns that turn out to be dust. Sometimes I go out to the ridge on my nights off and walk to the old line. In daylight it's hard to find. The new growth pretends there was never a cut, but the snag is still there like a raised finger refusing to learn any new tricks. I lay my palm against it. It's cooler than it should be in sun. If I close my eyes, I can hear men working at a pace that isn't ours. Metal against stone. The small talk of breath. I don't stay long. The woods aren't a museum. You don't stand in front of a memory and make it perform. When I lock the tower at dawn and the sun catches the ladder cage in a web of gold, I sometimes feel that count of 8 run down my spine and pool at the base. I don't know what it is. Habit, guilt, the leftover electricity from a job done late. I pour out the last coffee, wash the pot, and leave the room, like I want the next person to believe nothing happened there, that a broom couldn't have had to solve. It's a discipline. It's a way to keep from making a cult out of a moment. People think the scariest thing is fire. It is, if you've ever watched it move with the calm of a big animal and understood that it is not angry, just thorough. But there's something second scariest that I only learned with the cameras. It's that places keep the work we do in them. Not just the black scars and the stumps, but the pacing, the breathing, the counting to 8, the unmade calls. If the same person sits in the same chair long enough, they can tune to what's left. They can hear a line still asking to be tied. I don't have anything clever to close with. I never saw a face in the lights. I never chased a phantom into the trees. That's not how this went. We finished a thing we didn't finish and said a thing we didn't say when it would have mattered more. Maybe that helped someone. Maybe it helped me. The tower's heater still bangs. The coffee still tastes like burnt pennies. The wind still makes the antenna cable groan when it wants attention. Sometimes at 2:17, the radio light brightens half a shade, and I stay very still and let the air decide. If it speaks, I don't tell anyone. If it doesn't, I don't push it. I log what can be logged when I drive home after a night like that. The 2-lane unspools under the pines, and a deer looks up from the ditch with that foolish grace they have. And for a second, the shape of its ears is exactly the shape of a helmet reflector catching sun. I drive on. I don't take that as a sign. I let it be one more thing the woods remember for me, because that's what they do out here. They keep whatever you give them, the lines you cut, the mistakes you don't confess, the names you say once and don't say again, the count you can't help but keep. They don't punish, they don't forgive, they keep. And in the keeping they wait until you're the only one awake at an hour that belongs to nobody, and then they show you a loop until you know how to let it end. You learn a forest as voice the way you learn a city as, not by the noise it makes, but by what it swallows. The private estate in Surrey where I took the night post had 300 acres of old woodland that didn't make a fuss. Beeches and oaks muscling one another for light, a disused bridle path mossed boundary stones, and a perimeter fence that hummed in a clean highway when the wind pressed it. My patch was at the fence line, the gatehouse, the lodge, 2 empty cottages, and a straight woodland track once called East Ride on the old maps. Closed, the sign said, hammered through with a bent nail. Red paint gone to the color of liver. They issued me a battered patrol handset. Black brick, cracked screen. Single green button to log time-stamped notes. Priest, the head of security, pressed it into my palm like it was a relic. He looked like someone had drawn a scarecrow on a man, and then put the man inside. Main thing, he said, if you hear anything at 0217, you log it. You don't chase it. You log it. Why always 217? He watched me as if I'd asked why water was wet. Because that's when it is. The first week bored me in the precise way boredom becomes menace. Fox bark pinged off the trunks and came back like laughter. Owls flattened sound so you couldn't tell where their throats were. Once, a hair exploded from bracken, and I apologized to it out loud. The cottages had that cold stone tang, with something metallic underneath as if someone had stored tools in the air. The lodge's oil stove left a sweetness. The visitor log lived on the desk with a pen that never had ink. I learned where the ground went soft after rain and how to sidestep it, which branch leaned in to cuff your cheek if you forgot its name, how the fence sang through glove leather. You could feel the note in your teeth. The first 0217 came on a Tuesday. I was at the north boundary, opposite a little lay-by, where delivery vans idled by day. Bare trees made the fence line look like a silver stitch. My radio hissed, settled. The handset warmed in my pocket as if someone had been holding it. I hadn't pressed the button, and I heard it. Footsteps on gravel where there is no gravel. A deliberate pace that slowed near me and stopped. Security, I said, torch bending bracken to light. Who's there? The beam cut the trunks into pale pillars. Something caught and threw back a tiny blink. Not eye shine, glass, metal. My radio clicked. North Run, Lodge to East Ride. Copy. The voice didn't belong to anyone on our team. Clipped, patient, the drag of old tape in it. I pressed transmit. Say again. Who is this? Silence. And then, gatehouse to North Run. Wind south-southwest. Visibility poor. Fire watch maintained. It was the way men used to speak when they believed a dome could hold things together. My chest felt too small. Control, I whispered. I'm getting bleed on the set. Old training audio. Reese came back after a few seconds. That made me think he'd counted them. Negative. You near East Ride. North boundary. Stay put. Log it. I pressed the green button. The handset chirped and showed 02.17, and under it, impossible, words I hadn't typed. Footsteps on gravel. Wind SSW, the same phrasing. I thumbed for a menu I'd never seen. The text blinked, shifted, added a line I definitely did not write. Do not chase. Back at the gatehouse, Priest didn't touch the set. He poured tea and stared at the steam as if reading it. You know about the fire, he said, before my time. Most things are. His mouth moved without deciding to smile. Keeper called Hallam. Fire started at the far end of East Ride. Heather went like straw. He took a beater in. Wind turned. He didn't. And the radio. The woods keep what they're given. He lifted a shoulder inside the coat. We had lunchbox radios back then. Paper logs. Maybe the place liked it better. You're saying the forest records us? I'm saying if you hear something at 217, you log it. By the end of the week, a new habit. A pale, rectangular glow deep between the trunks. Not a torch, but door light. The shape your front hall throws when you forget to shut it. When I angled toward it, it slid behind other trees, and when I returned to where I'd first seen it, it had moved. The handset warmed in my pocket like a hand. Sometimes I'd pull it out and find the screen already awake, half words resolving if I looked too long. East, ride, keep, and fading if I blinked. Stop bringing the job home, Saba told me. On video, the blue of our kitchen wall behind her. Sleep in daylight. Don'd stand by the window and listen for a garden that isn't tea calling you. On Friday, the handset offered patrol audio where notes should have been. I tapped. A list of clips dated in the 80s. The oldest sounded thin, mic too close to chest. Wind. Men speaking like they didn't want to wake anything up. Gatehouse, Hallam on East Ride. Heather's dry despite rain. Someone's been through. Boot prints, narrow last. Child's boot. No. Too long. Tap. Rain hiss. See it near the boundary stone. That's not a... The noun cut in half. Tap. Nothing but a faint dink noise like a metal tag testing a fence post. Control, I said, standing at the closed sign on East Ride, touching the bent nail that held it. Your handset archive. Did you push audio to units? We don't push anything, Bree said. You keep your distance. That night at 02:17, the footsteps came, not on gravel, but on leaf litter. A measured tread like a man keeping pace with a metronome. They stopped behind me. I turned, beam flattening brush into a sheet. When I looked back, the rectangular light stood closer, and for a second, a man stood in it. Cap, heavy coat, shoulders set as if to hold air, waiting for me to join him in that pale rectangle. My torch blinked, not died, blinked, like eyes do when they agree and hate agreeing. The handset vibrated. A new clip opened itself. If I do not return, don't follow. Tell Angela the trees remember. It was a name like any other, until it wasn't. My mother taught me to read deer sign in Richmond Park when I was 8. Angela would sit on a bench and talk quietly, and I'd track the shine on nibbled stems. Common name, common deer. The feeling landed anyway. A specific thread tugged from a long way back. The handset beeped. Fire watch maintained. Wind SSW scrolled across. The smell of iron moved through the trees, the way old coins smell when your hand has been in a jar. I took 3 steps toward the light, and the temperature under my jacket changed, as if I'd walked into a boiler room. Breath stopped smoking. Shadows shortened in a way dawn does to a wood. The door resolved to pure pale, with nothing to hang on. Inside it, the back of a man walking away, carrying something like an oar. He turned fractionally when I said his name without knowing I knew it. Hallam. My radio crackled with Bree's voice, and underneath it another that said the same words in the same rhythm, but older, like a brother speaking through the first. Stand down. Log it. Hallam pinched the 2 fingers together, and the door narrowed to a seam. In it, Heather shimmered without moving the air. The smell of paraffin came and went, like a mouth opening. I didn't go in. I walked the fence until dawn and tried to feel proud of that. At shift change, Brees wasn't there. Lobo, the new lad, signed me in without looking up. Head cold, he said with a smirk. You only get before life sands it off. You get the spookies. Grow up, I said, and heard how tired my voice was. Sunday, rain fell that hadn't been forecast, and the wood took it without thanks. I cut in toward the boundary stones, square blocks the moss had decided to keep, numbers chiseled small on their faces. I'd walked past them all week, never noticing more than their stubbornness. 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗡𝗦 had fresh-looking numerals despite the green. When I wiped it, my glove came away smelling of iron. A rusted chain lay like a wristwatch strap from the stone into the litter. The handset buzzed. Gatehouse to North Run. Then 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗡𝗦. Then turn back. Copy, I said out loud, and didn't. The light was deep and off the ride, hung between ash trunks like a sheet on a line. Within it, a floor-sized patch of heather burned orange without smoke. Every part of me trained for immediate action, tried to stamp it out. I took a half step, and the ground sank. Not mud, not rot, but as if a path remembered where my boot would go, and made room. Don't, I told myself, and the voice sounded like my father's when I was 14. Then, gentler. All right. Hallam, I called, and put the hush in my mouth. You learned for churches and maternity wards. He turned his head. The cap brim made shade where his eyes should be. The thing in his hand was a beater, the wide paddle on a handle you swing to starve fire of oxygen. He put his forefinger to his lips, not to hush me, but to hush the wood. He tapped the beater against his boot. The sound arrived to my ear half a beat late, like audio out of sync. The handset spoke inside my glove, with a voice I knew was his, without having met him. If you can hear me, we're on the same line. Wind's turned. Don't come east. That's where it runs. Tell them I saw. The clip cut itself short. New text scrolled. 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗡𝗦. Jane. I knelt, fingers in cold leaf mold until they ached, and found the chain's curve, old iron I could feel teeth with. When I lifted it, the door of pale fluttered, and at last I saw beyond the man. Not more ride, not more heather, but a thin corridor of trees that matched the space I occupied, as if the wood had been traced over itself on parchment. I smelled oil and a damp sweetness, like paraffin on wool. Behind me, a footstep crunched. I spun. The torch found wet boot prints filling with rainwater one by one, the direction wrong. They led to me and then stopped. No prints leading away. At showed 217. Radio, handset, and light all made a shared, tired sound. The one fluorescent tubes make when they decide to quit. I heard a man inhale to say the thing orders had told him not to say. He said it anyway, and not through the set or the radio, but through the wood itself. The trees don't burn, Hallam said. They remember fire. The rain stopped like a valve closing. The door pinched to a seam, and to nothing. I stood there breathing like I de-sprinted and realized my hand hurt where the chain had chewed it through the glove. In daylight, I brought the chain to Priest. He picked it up with a cloth. 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗡𝗦, I said. Your logs ever mention a chain? We had a run there until 83. He didn't look at me. Took it down after a boy got tangled. He lost the end of the sentence. You need sleep. You told me the woods keep records. That was me being poetic, he said. I'm not paid for poetry. Saba drove to the gatehouse that evening and tried to put the lid back on me. Take a night off. The dead can wait. I don't think they can, I said, and didn't like the sound of it. Then don't go in alone, she said. Call someone who knows fire. A local crewman named Chilton met me by the old trail in daylight. He had hands like kindling and knees that knew weather. He pinched soil and smelled it. You had heat here, he said, long ago. He showed me where stems braided after heat slicked them. He pointed at 𝗦𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗡𝗦. Iron remembers. So do people. At dusk, the wood turned honest again, which is to say it showed me only what I could carry. The next night, the handset stayed cold in my pocket. The light didn't come at the usual time. Instead, a metal tag knocked twice against the stone in the far right of the dark. I turned my torch off and let my eyes accept the bargain. Some things you only see when you stop pointing light at them. I wrote on paper instead of the handset. My letters tired in a way that looked like my father's. I signed, then on a private dare wrote, "Fire watch maintained, wind SSW." The pencil chattered a little on the logbook's cheap paper. When I closed it, I knew what would be under it in the morning. A note in someone else's hand. It was, "Annual leave. Approved. 2 weeks. See you after." Priest's letters wobbled like he'd written with a blunt pencil on his knee. Underneath, in tight, old-fashioned capitals I didn't recognize, "Tell Angela the trees remember." I photographed it. At home, I slept across the hour the wood prefers. When I woke, the kitchen smelled of the tea Saba had made, and the back door was open to a patch of garden with nothing extraordinary in it, just damp grass and a slug trying one more bad idea. The wind came south-southwest and carried that faint, clean sweetness oil has when it lives in wood. "What do they want?" she asked, because she loves tidy questions. "Not to be forgotten," I said. I went back after one night off, telling myself I didn't believe in time keeping the same appointment forever. The wood corrected me. The door came at 02:17, as if I'd never left. Hallam walked his rectangle, tapping the beater like a man counting. He didn't turn that night. The night after, he did. He touched 2 fingers to the brim in the old way and walked on. I stopped thinking of it as haunting. Recording made more sense. A place takes impressions the way a thumbprint takes powder. Walk a line often enough, and even after a good rain, you can see the darker earth where boots have compacted it. Feel the slight dish, even with torch off. Sound does the same. Light does the same. Work does the same. I asked Priest for the old incident plans. He pulled a box down from a cabinet that had slept since before I started and coughed through dust that smelled like textbooks. A tracing of East Ryde lay over a map. Someone, S-pencil, had drawn an X halfway down the line, where it was supposed to tie into another run. A name in block letters anchored the corner. Hallam. "We finished that tie-in?" I asked. "We thought we did," Priest said. Morning said otherwise. "Can you finish something 40 years later?" He looked at me like he wanted to laugh and couldn't afford it. "You can try." We did it badly and with caution. I took a spade and a rake and went with Priest at midnight, because if you're going to insult a ghost of work by redoing it, you should bring the man who pretends he doesn't believe in ghosts. We lifted litter to expose mineral earth, a pale crescent that looked too raw in a dark place. It felt like cutting a new scar into old skin. Nothing changed. No light swelled. No voice stepped out of the bark to thank us. We stood with our hands on our knees like old men after stairs and breathed until our breath sounded less like panic. Then a glow moved along the parallel line, not bright, not showy. 3 beads, then men, then beads again. The way your eyes rewrite what they think they see when they have a better option. They paused exactly once, as if counting invisible feet in invisible heather. Then they carried on. When the glow lay down and the wood was only wood again, Priest said very quietly, "We should have done that then. We didn't know. We never do. We didn't talk about it after. That was our superstition. Leave the lid on the jar unless you need the smell." The handset fell back into the natural rhythm of a site that mostly looks after itself. Fences hum. deer commute, foxes court. The cottages settle the way old houses do when no one's inside. Sometimes the door still comes at 02:17. Sometimes it doesn't. On nights it does, I stand where I can see without stepping into it. If I hold the chain scar on my glove to the light, the thin iron bruises in the leather glow like a vein. On nights it doesn't. I put my palm on the logbook and feel the paper carry the faint texture of words below the top page. Trace them lightly, and you can read the shape someone else's pen made. That's how the place is now. Pressure through layers. I never told 𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗬𝗧 the whole of it, only the part she could carry and still sleep. Once, in the supermarket, I smelled oil and looked up, certain the wood had put its hand on my shoulder. It was a man wiping a shelf with polish. I laughed. It came out wrong, and a child in the next aisle stared in the frank way children punish adults for slipping their masks. The last time the door stood close enough for detail, the man inside it lifted his beater and rested it on his shoulder as if a bell had rung somewhere I couldn't hear. He looked up toward where the gatehouse would be if our two woods matched exactly, and then he turned his head just enough that, if the brim hadn't shadowed his eyes, I could have told you what color they were. He put 2 fingers to the brim again. Old-fashioned gratitude. Or farewell. Hallam, I said as softly as I could. Fire watch maintained. The seam narrowed, and the wood took it back like breath. The fence hummed an ordinary note. Somewhere a fox said something rude to another fox. I wrote my line in the paper log and thought of the boy who got tangled in the chain, and of the man who went in with a beater, believing he would come out. I thought of my mother in the park, pointing at hoof prints and telling me the ground is a book if you learn its alphabet. I don't think the dead want much. I think they want to be recorded correctly. The woods helped us do that because they had already done it themselves. The heat kept the footsteps that didn't touch gravel, and the shape of heat on iron, and the patience of a man at work. They'd kept at the exact time a voice stopped being allowed to speak and spoke anyway. Now, when the wind goes south-southwest and smells faintly sweet, I feel it in my teeth like the fence hum, and I count to 8 without meaning to, the way men do when they lift in time. If I'm home, I stand by our back door and look at the square of grass and the neighbor 𝗧𝗛𝗢𝗥 throwing its clean black filigree on our fence. 𝗧𝗢𝗥𝗬𝗢 asks if I'm listening to something. I say no. At shift handover, I keep my pen sharp and write legibly, so whoever stands here after me doesn't. You have to guess what I meant. I touch the old pencil tucked under the logbook's elastic, and the wood takes the weight of my hand. On the shelf by the radio, someone has left a cap with a cracked brim and a battered metal tag on the band. No one admits to owning it. No one moves it. Sometimes, at 02:17, it taps the shelf twice without help. We log it. We don't chase it. The forest keeps what it's given. And in keeping, it remembers.